Welcome to the 26th episode of Let's Talk About Electric Vehicles, a podcast about the technology and the economic effects of electrified transportation systems. My name is Teresa, I'm an economist, and I am delighted to introduce you to my co-host Theo, who hosted last week's episode about batteries. Thank you for joining me today.
Hi Teresa, thank you. I enjoyed creating an episode on my own, but it's good to have you back. So last week I talked about a bunch of battery chemistries, ending with lithium ion, which is now the dominant battery chemistry for electric vehicles. You may remember that annoying sound effect from last episode. And I mentioned that we'd dig further into the lithium ion battery.
So today we'll talk about the extraction of lithium from natural sources and about the global market forces that affect lithium supply and demand.
I'm excited to learn more about this basic building block of modern batteries.
One quick editorial note. During the episode, we use the terms production and extraction interchangeably. But either way, we're talking about getting lithium out of the earth.
So Teresa, what exactly is lithium? I know it's a pretty awesome grunge song by Nirvana. But beyond that, what the heck is it?
Lithium, the third element of the periodic table. The white gold, a silvery white soft metal, a metal with very high electrochemical potential, lighter than water, hence it even floats.
A metal that floats, that's cool. Must be very interesting chemically. I also realized that it's used as a medication. So how much lithium is used in batteries versus the other uses?
Well, I found different estimates from different sources for the percentages, but batteries account roughly for 35 to 60% of the global lithium consumption depending on the source, followed by glass and ceramic. Is it pronounced ceramic?
Yep.
Yeah, glass and ceramic applications. So these are the main two types of lithium consumption, but there are tons of other utilizations that have been developed since the element became commercially available roughly 100 years ago.
Wow, it's used in a ton of ways and has been for a really long time. That's interesting.
And recently, lithium has been gaining more and more attention as the demand for electric vehicles and thereby the demand for lithium-containing batteries is expected to rise. So today, we want to give you an overview of the global lithium production, starting off with how lithium is produced, where you can find it, and who the big players in the industry are. Moreover, I conducted an interview with the CEO of the lithium extraction company E3 Metals, and I am very excited to share some industry insights with you. Theo, are you ready to unravel the lithium market dynamics with me?
Heck yeah, let's talk about lithium. Okay, so first I'm curious where lithium is found. I've heard that crushing rocks and extracting lithium from brines are two ways of producing lithium.
Yeah, that's right. The majority of the current lithium supply stems either from brines, which are underground reservoirs of lithium-rich water, or from minerals or igneous rocks. The end product of the production facilities is usually a lithium compound, in most cases lithium carbonate, but sometimes also lithium hydroxide.
Oh, so did you find any numbers for the total worldwide lithium resources?
Yes, which leads me right away to the first important distinctions: resources versus reserves. Resources are the estimated deposits, whereas reserves only describe the already confirmed deposits. Both numbers have changed quite a bit over the last couple of decades with the rising global interest in lithium. So I found that the worldwide reserves are over 14 million metric tons of lithium, and the resources are estimated at about 34 million metric tons. But these numbers have changed quite a lot over the last decade due to continuous exploration.
Wow, so that sounds like a lot, but I have trouble understanding how much of a lot. Like, how big is a pound of lithium, and how many car batteries can you make with 14 million metric tons of lithium?
That 14 million metric tons of lithium reserves I mentioned would be enough to fill around 10 large sports stadiums to the brim. As for the number of EV batteries you could make, so each Tesla battery pack, for example, is estimated to use around 63 kilograms of lithium. At that rate, if you used every bit of the reserves just for car batteries, you could make around 200 million of them.
Interesting. Seems like a lot, but also not that much considering we have billions of people who would like to drive cars. So around the world, where are most of the lithium resources located?
The majority is found in South America, namely about 60%. So you may have heard of the South American Triangle before, or ABC, which stands for Argentina, Bolivia, and Chile. Especially Chile seems to have large resources. Large amounts of lithium are also found in North America, so both in the US and Canada, in Australia, in China, and about 3.5% of the global resources are found in Europe.
Cool. So we've talked about where the lithium is. Now, how do we extract it? How do we get it out of the ground?
Let's start off by lithium from brines, which makes up about half of the global lithium production. In about 80% of the cases, lithium brines are located underneath dried lake beds. Brines not only contain lithium, but also other elements like potassium and sodium, which can be a bit annoying if you only want to extract lithium. The conventional way to extract lithium from brines using current technology is that the lithium-rich underground waters get pumped to the surface, where they are then collected in little ponds that shall evaporate underneath the sun.
Just letting the sun do its work sounds like a cheap and practical method. It's basically using solar power to make lithium. But what if it rains?
That is a good question. Many of the dried salt lakes are found in areas with a dry climate anyways. Nevertheless, the sun evaporation process is a restriction for sure. It may be cheap, but it requires a lot of time. The ponds evaporate in the sun for up to 12 months before they achieve the desired lithium concentration. As soon as the optimum concentration is achieved, so it's still a liquid, but they have optimum lithium concentration, the solution is pumped into a recovery plant where the lithium is extracted by filtering out any unwanted elements, which can be quite tricky sometimes, and the rest of the brine will then be pumped into that dry lake bed.
I see. So what happens if solar evaporation is not an option?
Solar evaporation has been the state of the art for the last decades, but another way to do it are the so-called direct extraction processes, or short DLE. Direct extraction processes are a whole family of methods to extract lithium from brine without solar evaporation ponds. They're not that common yet, though. For this episode, I interviewed the CEO of E3 Metals Corporation, which is a company that plans on applying a direct extraction process in order to extract lithium here in Alberta, where I live. I will talk more about E3 Metals a bit later.
Okay, so that's how we extract lithium from brines. What about the other methods of lithium production, like crushing rocks?
So as I said, about half of the lithium is extracted from brines, and the other half stems from minerals, hence by crushing lithium-rich rocks. There are over 100 different types of minerals that contain lithium, but the one that is most commonly used for lithium production is spodumene. Spodumene.
Spider-Man. Maybe you probably had it right.
Spodumene.
Yeah.
This is a rather costly process, but in comparison to the time-intensive solar evaporation, it is much faster. It requires certain hydrometallurgical processes and it is relatively energy and material intensive. The cost of extracting lithium from hard rock is estimated to be double that of producing it from brines.
Interesting, and it sounds more energy intensive too. So are these crushing the rocks and extracting it from brines the only two lithium extraction methods?
These are currently the only two commercially employed lithium production methods. There are several other ways of extracting lithium though. For example, processing lithium from clay, from seawater, and of course gaining lithium back from old batteries, hence recycling.
Wow, so there's lithium in seawater. Is it in all seawater?
Yes, and there's a huge amount, but at extremely low concentrations, and it's hard to extract. Scientists are working on it though.
Huh. And given the fact that lithium demand is increasing quickly, it does seem likely that disruptive lithium extraction technologies are going to come around, maybe from seawater or maybe some improved brine or ore extraction process.
Yeah, that's very likely.
Cool. So, okay, we've talked about the practical parts of how to extract lithium. Now, I'm sure as an economist, you're anxious to talk about the market forces that affect lithium.
Yeah, so there are several interesting aspects of the lithium world market. There seems to be a competitive oligopoly situation, meaning that there are a handful of companies that make up for the majority of the supply.
So what about the lithium demand? Which countries are the biggest lithium consumers?
So China seems to be the biggest lithium consumer. For example, in 2015, China accounted for over 50% of the global lithium consumption. Even though there are some lithium resources in China, both from brines and from minerals, China is heavily dependent on the Australian lithium production. There are a few very recent market dynamics that I found interesting and that I found worth mentioning. According to the Battery Metals podcast, there seems to be an oversupply of lithium at the moment, causing the prices to be at a very low level. Producers have very low profit margins and they even hold back further investments.
Wow, so you're saying there's actually too much lithium on the market right now?
Yes, so everyone seems to wait for the electric vehicle boom, which is yet to come. But most experts are certain that the demand for electric vehicles and therefore the demand for lithium will rise up soon. Yeah, but who knows?
Yeah, it certainly seems like all the major car companies are shifting their resources towards electric car production, which will result in a spike in lithium demand over the next 5 years. Plus, Tesla plans to build more gigafactories and has proven that they can crank out gigafactories quickly. It'll be interesting to see what happens to that lithium surplus.
As I have mentioned earlier, I am in the lucky position that there is a lithium development company right around the corner where I live, and it is called E3 Metals. So I gave them a call, and the CEO, Chris Dornboos, was kind enough to answer some questions of mine. Unfortunately, the voice audio recording did not properly work this time, so I am not able to play his original answers to you, but I will do my best to replicate his answers. E3 Metals Corporation is not a conventional lithium producer, namely for two reasons. The first reason being the location of the reservoir, which brings several advantages. And secondly, E3 Metals Corporation has a particular extraction technology.
So what is so special about the location? I know that Alberta is known for its oil resources. Is there a connection between oil and lithium?
Well, this area, which is by the way called the Leduc or the Leduc Reservoirs, is one of Alberta's oldest oil productions. According to Chris Dornboos, the first oil discovery in Leduc was 1947, and people have been extracting oil ever since. Nowadays, the oil resources in this reservoir seem to be exhausted though. Now, there is a subtle connection between oil and lithium. What I didn't know and what Chris explained to me was that when pumping oil, you inevitably pump water up to the surface as well. And it happens to be the case that the water in the Leduc area contains a high lithium concentration.
Wow, so how much lithium did they find down there?
E3 Metals mapped out 6.7 million tons of lithium carbonate equivalent. According to Chris, it is the sixth largest lithium resource in the world.
That's a lot. That's a pretty big portion of the world's resource. And I bet it helps to have all the oil extraction infrastructure around to help with the lithium extraction.
Yes, so E3 Metals could now repurpose the retired oil infrastructure, such as well sites and pipelines, and furthermore benefit from the fact that this area is very well investigated and known already. They already have tons of information about the size and other characteristics about the reservoir.
So you said there's hardly any oil actually left in this reservoir. But I wonder, would it eventually be possible to extract both oil and lithium at the same time, either in Leduc or possibly elsewhere?
Apparently, yes, because the water gets pumped up anyways. What is also worth mentioning is that the brine in Leduc shows ideal flow rates and high temperatures. These high temperatures can be used for heat and power plants, for example, but they are also helpful for the innovative extraction process that was developed by the University of Alberta and E3 Metals Corporation, which does not require solar evaporation.
That's neat. You can use the super hot lithium soup to generate power and heat buildings and also help in the extraction of the lithium itself. And I bet that the process belongs to the family of direct lithium extraction processes that you mentioned earlier. Tell me more about this special extraction process that doesn't require solar evaporation. Like, how does it work?
So yeah, it is called ion exchange, and you're right, it belongs to the family of direct lithium extraction, or DLE. Chris explained to me that this is a chemical process that is very selective for lithium, and it is very effective in excluding other elements such as sodium, which apparently can screw up the purity of lithium sometimes. This method is energy efficient, cost efficient, relatively quick, and yet has the advantage of high purity.
Sounds magical. Do you know how far along E3 Metals is in their development?
So it seems like they are currently working on a pilot for the ion exchange process. The process works fine under laboratory conditions. They have recently announced that they are working together with another very experienced lithium producer called Livent Corporation, and they hope to be able to test if the ion exchange is commercially viable under real-world conditions within the next 12 months.
Well, I hope they succeed. Out of curiosity, are there other companies doing this too? Has anyone gotten DLE working at scale?
So I found a few other pilot projects and commercial plant designs for direct lithium extraction processes. However, none of them seems to be already producing at scale.
Oh, really cool. There's something oddly poetic about extracting lithium for electric cars from the same place where we used to get oil for gas ones. I hope it succeeds.
We have almost reached the end of this episode about lithium extraction and markets, but let us quickly wrap up the most important information. Theo, want to sum it up?
Yeah, I'll give this a try. So in terms of extraction, about half of the global lithium supply is produced by crushing lithium-rich rocks, and the other half by extracting lithium from underground brines. The former is fast but energy-intensive, whereas the latter is cheap, but currently requires several months because of the solar evaporation process. However, there are ways in development to extract lithium from brines that do not require solar evaporation, called direct lithium extraction. E3 Metals Corporation in Alberta, for example, designed such a process.
That's right, and from a market standpoint, the lithium market is dominated by just a handful of producers that make up the majority of the market, hence an oligopoly. Currently, there seems to be an oversupply, so there's too much lithium for too little demand, which drops the price and makes producers postpone capacity expansion plans.
And many experts expect the demand for lithium to boom in the near future due to the implementation of electrified transportation. Teresa, what do you think about the future development of the lithium demand?
So, my personal crystal ball shows me tons of electric vehicles in the near future. How about yours?
Yeah, it really looks like the electrification of vehicles is inevitable at this point. The only question in my mind is whether some new battery tech will come along, reducing the need for lithium. But realistically, that would take years to develop. So for the next, 10 to 20 years, I think we can expect great increases in lithium demand.
Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. We hope that you learned something new today. Feel free to send us feedback or topic suggestions either on Facebook or on electricvehiclepodcast@outlook.com.
Yeah, and if you'd like to support us, feel free to join us on Patreon, and please give us a rating in your favorite podcast app. Also, check out our shiny new website at evtalk.co.
Also, I'm taking a short break from the podcast for a couple of weeks, but I am excited to talk about the economic effects of electric vehicles with you again in around mid-November. But in the meanwhile, Theo will entertain you with some technical episodes.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to digging into the chemistry and other technical details of lithium batteries.
And with that being said, Have a wonderful week and bye.
Bye.